Harry's wife. They are absolutely separating. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. There has been speculation about the state of the Sussexes' marriage for quite some time. There were pronouncements last year that they'd actually separated and that they were just doing public appearances under the terms of some kind of joint agreement for the purposes of maintaining appearances. Before we dive into the news which comes from skynews.com.au, good old straight-talking Australians, let's have a quick reminder of why separation is a distinct possibility here. Well, the first thing to remember, of course, is that we have a relationship that is between a narcissist and her victim. And therefore, that means that the relationship with him as the intimate partner primary source, the most important person in her fuel matrix, being the easiest person to control, the person that provided the most fuel, the person with the greatest number of character traits and residual benefits, is somebody who at first is subjected to the golden period. He's drawn in and given the good stuff. This is an illusion. It's done because if we were red of tooth and claw all of the time, we wouldn't get any victims. So we need to be able to draw that person in. We need to be able to ensure that that victim is brought under control. We do so by the imposition of the golden period, sometimes the bronze period. But here, Harry undoubtedly got the golden period. Thereafter, what happens? Well, it moves to the sustained devaluation. That is what always happens when you're ensnared by a narcissist. You can't avoid it, you can't stop it. It is inevitable as the advancement of time itself. At some juncture, during the sustained devaluation, the victim may escape as a consequence of the abuse that they have received. They get out. In other instances, which is more common, the narcissist disengages from, and I've explained in a separate video the 5 reasons why the narcissist leaves you, or the 5 reasons why the narcissist disengages from you. And therefore, that is more likely to occur. And then, in some instances, there is neither escape nor disengagement, and the relationship just trundles along. I explained previously that I saw, in terms of the future of the Sussexes, that Harry's wife would disengage from him and that this would take place in the near future. I explained more recently that this has been accelerated as a consequence of what had occurred by way of the disclosures from Wa, which have impacted upon her. Thus I see that disengagement will occur, that the relationship will end, and that divorce will follow. It is not a happy union between the narcissist and their victim. It never is. Despite what might be shown to the outside world, and invariably, of course, that's the facade, you will never, ever have a happy relationship with the narcissist. Even marriages which have run on for decades, behind the scenes, there'll be problems of some sort where a narcissist is involved. But in relation to the situation involving Harry and Harry's wife, skynews.com.au, the report by Stacey Eldridge, tells us he's not in the family house anymore. Now, you'll recall that in other videos I made reference to the fact that Harry apparently has a couple of bolt holes, that he goes and stays in a hotel and he stays at the San Vicente bungalows as well. The headline tells us he's not in the family house anymore. Harry's wife is absolutely separating from Prince Harry, who's in a hopeless situation. And it's certainly the case that he's in a hopeless situation because he's being devalued by a narcissist. But let's find out more in terms of this evidence and where it comes from. Royal expert Angela Levin claims, isolated, and indeed he is, Prince Harry is being abandoned by his planner and plotter wife, Harry's wife, who is absolutely separating from him. The author of Harry, a biography, told GB News host Dan Wooten, the Duke of Sussex is not even in the family house anymore. It's not made clear as to how this is known, but that is the allegation. It comes after the Sun claimed Harry has a room permanently booked in the luxury San Vicente bungalows in West Hollywood that he visits without his wife. Either she's shouting at him to get out, or he can't take it, and it's there, Ms. Levin told the veteran British broadcaster. I think if you have a row in your marriage, you perhaps might go into another room. If you book a room permanently, that means you are going to use it a lot. So he's not in the family house anymore. It would seem to me, therefore, that the journos have done some digging around and somebody's been bunged a few $100s and has confirmed that Harry has a permanent booking at the San Vicente bungalows, and therefore they have deduced from that by having a permanent booking, it must mean that he's not living there any longer. That would seem a reasonable deduction. Of course, the alternative might be that he is so used now to being on the receiving end of the devaluing behaviours, such as being shouted at and frozen out, etc., that what he decides to do instead is this. He keeps the permanent booking because he doesn't know necessarily when he'll need it. He can keep his PlayStation down there and some personal effects in there so he doesn't have to keep shuttling them backwards and forwards, and that he isn't necessarily permanently living there, but he just uses it as a bolt hole as and when the heat becomes too much for him in Monty Shit Show. And then he's hoovered back in and goes crawling back. Either, therefore, he's not living there at all and he's permanently at San Vicente bungalows, or he uses it as a bolt hole, but he uses it so frequently he's decided that he might as well have a permanent booking. But it would appear that the journos have unearthed the fact that he has a permanent booking there. Mr. Wooten noted that the Duchess of Delusion has been showing a notable lack of public support for her ginger-whinger husband recently, snubbing him, a kiss at the basketball, public devaluation, see parts pass him, failing to attend the coronation, and being absent from his book tour. Not all appeals well, Mr. Wooten said. And indeed his observations are accurate, as I've explained previously that she's hung him out to dry. Of course, the PR team do their best to suggest that there is no problem and that the reason that she's not involved is it's his story and she's letting him tell it, etc., even though, of course, it's got her fingerprints all over it. Ms. Levin agreed, adding that Harry's wife has kept away when Harry has really needed her. Well, that is demonstrative, of course, of the absence of emotional empathy that she has. My feeling is that Harry is actually doing something that is negative, that is upsetting, that will make him feel that he hasn't succeeded. And Harry's wife is going the other way, going around in gold, and going to perhaps get a big part in a film, and has a very good new agent. So she is absolutely separating from him. She hasn't been anywhere where he really needed her. Ms. Levin claims Harry's wife is sailing on ahead, and is making sure Harry is in a hopeless situation so that she can get custody of their 2 children. He's got a mental health issue, and he needs somebody there to prop him up, she said. But she keeps away, so he's doing all the nasty stuff and she's sailing on ahead. And I think that's the beginning of the end of it for him. She's making sure that he's in a hopeless situation so that she can get the children. He's completely isolated. Well, it's certainly the case that he has been isolated ever since she dragged him across to the United States. And, of course, she did this to nullify threats to control at the time from his friends and family. It has the collateral consequence later on that the unaware narcissist benefits from, namely that when the sustained devaluation kicks in, he hasn't got anybody to fight his corner. He goes willingly, not particularly concerned about the fact that he's leaving family and friends behind because, 1, he swallowed the Kool-Aid about them not being worthwhile, that they're against him. 2, as far as he can see, he's met the most wonderful woman in the world, that is kind to him, that is fun, that is interesting, that likes the things that he likes, that is supportive of him, that is kind about his vulnerabilities, provides him with lots of spicy poontang, and therefore, like many victims of a narcissist, they readily let go of their relationships because they think, but I'm with the most wonderful person in the world. And they don't realise, of course, that they're being fed an illusion. Thus, Harry volunteers, in effect, albeit under false pretenses, to lose all of those relationships, or minimise them. And the collateral consequence of that is that when the shit hits the proverbial fan during sustained devaluation, he suddenly finds himself isolated, both geographically and emotionally. He hasn't got any friends and family around him where he lives, and he's caused so many problems that there may not be a way back with regard to certain people who say, "Oh, now you want to know me. Well, you didn't for the last 2 or 3 years because of that woman. Why should I bother with you now?" Which is bound to be the response of some people. Quick dip below the line. Maggie writes, "I could see this disaster coming like a southbound freight train with its lights on." Al, "I am reminded of the Paul Kelly song. Then they started fighting. She took both the kids." Wendy, "If this is true, then the children will be taken from their mother, especially Archie, as they're of royal lineage and the royal family won't let her keep them, same as they did to Diana. All the while, the media give air to these two. They remain relevant, stop the reporting, etc., and they will fade into mediocrity. Michael W. was always just a matter of time." Vintage Lady, "I really do not believe they are separating, it's just gossip. I wish people would just leave them alone. I realise people always write stuff, but it's the false reporting that's upsetting. This is my opinion." 65923, as I've said before, whenever a British royal takes up with an American, it inevitably ends in tears. Son of Bomber, very predictable. It's time for King Charlie to take the Duke and Duchess title as well as the Prince and Princess title from the children. Brian, written sarcastically, could never have seen this coming. PB, the Netflix book and publicity tour were the beginning of the end. A smattering of observations. Angela Levin is convinced that they are absolutely separating. Time will tell, but certainly with regard to the dynamic of the relationship between a narcissist and her victim, separation is very likely. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.